All right, welcome back. That is the biggest conference lunch I have ever been offered in my life. Did anyone get through everything in their box? Did anyone sneak their box in? Okay. Let us proceed. This is a session entitled Disaster Volunteering and Organisational Resilience. As we have very recently seen in Queensland, in fact we continue to do so, there's flooding and heavy rain and the likelihood of flooding in the north of the state. Queensland is no stranger to natural disasters, floods and cyclones and bushfires and storms. And in times of crisis, disaster volunteers play a crucial role in response, recovery and rebuilding efforts, providing vital support to communities when they need it most. Their dedication helps ensure that swift action, emotional support and essential services reach those who are affected. It is my pleasure to introduce, she's been out there working literally on the recovery from Cyclone Alfred this morning and has given us very generously some of her time this afternoon. Please welcome Nadine Ramsay, who's the SES Local Controller, Brisbane City Council Resilience Team.
Thank you very much for having me. Don't be dismayed, I am actually nervous as on the inside here. I think I've been right royally stitched up, to be honest. But thank you very much. As you can see up on the board up here, you can see a photo of my volunteers for Brisbane. So I'm the local controller for Brisbane unit. It is the largest unit within Queensland. So I have approximately 647 members currently. That's what I look after. So I manage a very large number of volunteers. Another lovely picture of me. I wish I had put this PowerPoint together myself, because that would have been deleted for sure. Oh, we'll skip ahead. So obviously, as a local controller, I am appointed. It is an appointed position, and here in Brisbane, I'm actually fortunate enough to be one of the very paid local controllers. So as you might not know, not all local controllers are paid. Not a lot of councils can afford to do that. So I'm very fortunate and that I am supported by Brisbane City Council, and so I have that lovely role and responsibility. I'm not going to read that to you, but I just thought I'd put that there. With Brisbane City Council, I've been with Brisbane City Council for 16 years in compliance, so my background is very much issuing fines. So many of you probably sitting in this room have probably received a parking infringement or barking dog complaint maybe, or something like that. So if you've seen me in that role, please don't hold it against me. I am trying to rectify that by doing lots of good things now for the community. Another great shot. Lovely back shot of me there. Thank you, Esther, if you're here. Thank you, mate. That's a great job. That's me out in the field for Anzac Day. The members here in Brisbane, we do a lot of planned volunteering as well as a response to disasters, and this is just one of those examples. So Anzac Day, we go out there and we do a bit of crowd control, and I say crowd control, but it's not really, it's more observing, making and helping the police look out for anything suspicious. Of course, our members aren't going to be diving on any bombs or tackling anybody in the crowd that might be wielding a weapon. They'll just be reporting it, okay? So we'll just be real clear on that. So a little bit about what we do. As you know, the SES volunteers, they are volunteers and they're unpaid. So many times I go out to places and they're like, oh, don't you get paid? And I'm like, well, I do, but my members do not. So they're pouring hours and hours and hours into training and responding to numerous things. So they're chainsaw qualified, they're getting on house roofs, so they're heights qualified, they know how to do all those sorts of things. They do a lot of education work as well, so teaching the community how to be prepared for disasters and what they can do around their properties. And of course, you might not be aware, but they also do forensic searches, which I always thought was quite bizarre when I first took this role. I was like, really? They're out there looking for body parts and, you know, things that have been used in crime. I thought that was just for the police, but, you know, our members are out there doing that. Just recently, they were out using their flood boats looking for the person that fell into the Brisbane River. So as you can imagine, as a volunteer, not getting paid and being faced with the potential of finding that body. And as it so happens, my volunteers were the ones that found that body. So we have a massive duty of care to our volunteers, and I know that you know that, but it's always quite touching for me because I think they're not being paid, and they're going to probably end up with some issues. But hopefully not. Okay, I shouldn't say that, you know. They might not end up with issues, you know, if we play our cards right, they'll be perfectly normal. Oops. But as the local control, I mean, you have to have a laugh, right? You can't always be serious all the time, and that's part of it. So when I took over the local controller role here at Brisbane, you know, coming from a compliance background, I was, you know, and also military background. I don't know if you can pick up on that. Yes, I am ex-army. So I came into that role with a little bit more sternness than I probably should have. I was like, what do you mean you don't have structured rules but you can't just do what you like here. You know, there's this thing called hierarchy, and you know, you can't just. There are no cowboys in my team. So with that, we've had to put some new structure and policies and procedure and coming in there. But delivering that is quite tricky, because I can't just go out there and, you know, bring out the hand and go, you will do this. So softening that with volunteers has been quite a challenge. But if you're coming from a place of, you know, actual concern for their safety, I feel that's always an easy way in, you know. Don't get up on that roof without a height safety kit, because, you know, the problem is that when you get down, you might actually face me. So yeah, with that, I've put a lot of policies and procedures into place. Now, there is doctrine. SES, the state SES have doctrine, and we know that. But with volunteers, you know, you've got to imagine, you're coming in after a shift at work, you've had a hard day, you might be at home, you've just dealt with your teenagers or your fur babies and things like that, and you're going to training. You don't want to have to go and look for things. You want things to be simple. You want one central point of all that information, so that, you know, you can find that without me coming down on you going, why haven't you done this? So part of that is that we created a central point of information for the unit. So I've gathered all the information from Doctrine and all the other relevant platforms, and we've put them into SharePoint, amazing thing. It's not a huge big thing, but to volunteers, this is what it is. It's making things simple, you know, so that they can access things simply, and then they can get on with doing what they need to do. So that's the whole point of my role, is making sure that, yes, they're safe, but giving them options to access those documents without taking up their time. So a lot of the other things are, recruitment and retention. So we've redone the recruitment strategy. I don't know if anybody else here is having troubles trying to get volunteers. Yeah? Yep. It's a problem across the board, isn't it? Well, luckily for me, I'm pretty overabundant with volunteers that want to join the SES, especially after Alfred, you know, made such an impact. Everybody wants to join the SES here in Brisbane. So unfortunately, or fortunately, I don't know how you want to look at that, I have the problem of turning people away. So too many people want to join the SES. So whereas the days have gone by where we go, oh, we've got a job for you in the SES, we'll take anybody in the SES, that's actually not the case anymore. So we're really looking for the skill sets that are suitable to the role. So changing that recruitment strategy to focus on those has been a major turning point. And when you bring in people that have skill sets that you can share in that group, that's where the retention comes in as well, because they're doing something that they would do in their normal business, maybe, but they've got that comfort and that they know what they're doing, and then they can share that knowledge with others. So, yeah, that has been a big issue with recruitment for Brisbane. I know it's not the same for most of my other cousins, as we like to say, in Logan and Moreton Bay. Some of the other issues that that we've addressed in Brisbane unit are the logistics and the equipment, things like that. You've got volunteers coming in, they might have the skill set, they're an electrician. That can cause me some issue because they then want to do their own modifications on vehicles and things like that. Yeah, that's not okay. And if there's a beeping noise in the vehicle, it's probably not a good idea to cut that wire just to go and do the job. So we've got to rein that in, and that's where we have all our procedures for the vehicles. And on that, it's finding the equipment that's suitable as well. So not all vehicles are appropriate to be responding to the jobs that we're doing. So it's not a case of just having all Ford Rangers with all the latest kit on it and great big four-wheel drive tyres, because here in Brisbane, I don't know, there's not too many four-wheel drive areas here for us to do that. So, you know, you might end up driving an I-30, yeah, with a big ladder on the top. And no, I'm just joking. We would never get an I-30. That's not happening. But these are some of the things that I'm addressing, and I work with the volunteers. We bring them along on the journey to say, look, what is it that you need? You know, to stop cutting the wires on my vehicles and modifying them to suit your own needs. How about we just go out and find one that suits you? So that's what we're doing as well. And of course, my big one is the culture of the group. So you've got volunteers that have been doing their own thing for so long, and, you know, they just come in, do what they want to do, and they get the job done. And hang on a minute, now we've got a new local controller. Who is she? She can't tell me what to do. She's not even a volunteer. Guess what? I am. I am a volunteer. And so navigating that has been a big thing for me. So we've created the careers pathway for volunteers. So when we bring in the volunteers, we sit them down, we go, where do you want to go? What is it, the journey that you want? You know, do you want to be a chainsaw operator? Do you want to get on the roof? And they'll say, no, I have no intention of getting on the roof, Nadine. Okay, that's great. Well, what is it that you want to do? So we map out their journey and we help them get to where they want to go. And we find that that is actually helping with retention hugely. So don't just come into the SES and think, I'm going to do a bit of everything. Focus it, channel it, and, you know, hopefully you might actually leave the organisation. You might go and join the QAS or the QPS, or, you know, you might want to be a firey, of course, but we'll help you get there. And what we're doing is we're actually paving the way for, you know, that return investment. So hopefully they'll come back, or they'll spread the word and go, you know what, the SES is a great place to start, especially with the younger people that are coming through. Very keen to do things, they're very keen to learn, and but then they whisper in my ear and they go, don't tell anybody, but I'm really doing this just to join the fireys. Okay, I won't tell anybody. Guess what, they want to join the fireys. That's great, it's awesome, we want that, and we should encourage that and support them on their journey. And that's exactly what we're doing here in Brisbane. And there you go. I wish I had done my own PowerPoint. But they're just some of the things we've done. So I might just put it out to you now. If there's any questions that you would like to ask of me right now, I'm here to answer them. If not, yeah, right up the back.
So the excess volunteers, what have you done with them?
I was waiting for that. I was hoping somebody would ask that. It's like, yep, excess volunteers, here they come. So when we sit them down through the recruitment journey, they have a lovely speed date interview with me, and they tell me about all the reasons why they want to be an SES volunteer, and then I will kindly direct them into other directions and say there's other volunteer organisations that you can do that's more suited to you. So then we direct them to Volunteer Queensland, of course, and if there's anything that they say during that interview, we'll help them and we'll direct them to the right place so that they can make contact. So we get a lot of people that want to be involved with Meals and Wheels and things like that. So we help them go to the right area. We don't just kick them out the door and go, rightio, see you later. It's about
Nadine,
helping each other, right?
we've got a question online, and it's about how do you handle burnout with volunteers?
Yeah, the burnout. Mostly the burnout is with our executives, so our group leaders. So at each group, there's, that one person that's leading the group. And what I find that they're not just a group leader, they're a trainer. They're a trainer and they're a volunteer and all the rest of it. So we have just recently brought back the performance conversation with the group leaders, and that will filter down through to any member as well. So helping them make decisions that it's a little bit difficult. They need to let go. So there's a lot of control. They're stuck in their ways. So it's more conversational based. So we'll be helping those people make decisions to maybe step down from being a group leader and maybe just focusing on training. So that's the kind of thing that we're doing. And that's really relating back to the Career Pathways program.
Any other questions for Nadine? Up the back there.
Nadine Kirsten from Surf Lifesaving Queensland. We're seeing a real trend within surf lifesaving where we have a healthy volunteer base, but we have volunteers not wanting to put their hand up for more responsible roles. So finding it harder to find leaders within the organisation. So I just wondered if that is a trend that you have seen and how you've maybe countered that.
Yes, we definitely have. So the succession plans. I mean, this is where we talk about professionalising the SES unit. So gone are the days of just coming in and tinkering around in the shed and grabbing a chainsaw and off you go. It is also understanding what the roles are. So I've created role descriptions for the positions, for the executives, and then sitting down during these performance conversations, which is weird because they're volunteers, they're not getting paid. So, you might do that in your real, your paid role. You're sitting there, you'd have a performance conversation with your boss and you'd say, this is where I want to go. And then you get marked on the goals, whatnot. So we're bringing that into the volunteers, and we're finding that they don't have succession plans. And you have to have a succession plan. So what are these group leaders doing to help identify who's going to take over from them has been a huge, it's something that's so new to them because they're like, I don't have anybody that can fill in for me, Nadine. Okay, well, what are we going to do about it? So we're sitting down with these group leaders, we're identifying people that potentially have that skill set or that ability, and then we're building on that, encouraging them by pairing them up, doing some work shadow with a group leader. We've created more groups where they can go and learn some more things about leading, because a lot of these people are not used to being managers of people. So they're scared. Although they've got the skill set, they probably are just a little bit scared. So it's really sitting down with people and figuring out how is it that I can help you, just like you would in a normal work environment. So that's what we're doing in Brisbane, and we're finding that that's actually working quite well. So now they have a succession plan. They can bring the people along into these leadership meetings and gradually, build it on, so that we don't just dump it on them in the middle of an event and go, right, guess what, you're a leader today. No, I don't think so. So it's really about encouraging and supporting them right from the very beginning. And so you've got to understand, what is their goal? What do they want to do? Because I'm not going to just pick Sally, who's just been in the SES for 10 years, so therefore she must have the knowledge. She must have the experience to be a new group leader. No, Sally has no inclination of doing that. She doesn't feel confident doing that, so why would I? I might have somebody that's only been in the SES for 2 years, and they are really wanting to do that. They want to be a leader. Okay, grab that, harness that, and let's start bringing them along on a journey. And that's when you start to take them into the things, and then they can sort for themselves, and they can go, well, actually, it wasn't really what I thought it was. But in saying that, you have to have clear documentation. People need to know what the role is. So when I came into the SES, I said, well, what does a group leader do? A group leader couldn't tell me. I was like, you can't tell me what you do? Like, really? And they're like, oh, well, yeah, we manage a group. How do you do that? What is it that you do? They couldn't answer me. So I have written those role descriptions for them now. And we've sat with them and gone, does that sort of sit with you? Is that what a group leader does? Because that's what we can do as a paid person, is actually sit down and help them figure out what it is that they really need and then create it for them. And then they can go away and do it. Hope that answers your question.
Thank you.
Sorry. Thank you. Time up. Oh, there you go. Just I'm here all day. No, I'm just joking. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Excellent. See, nervous at the start, didn't want to leave the stage at the end. And if I'm not mistaken, appearing tonight at the Sit Down Comedy Club at Paddo Tavern. Okay, good. Excellent, excellent. Just in case. Okie dokes. So we're going to move into a sort of rapid fire session now called In Action, Setting the Standards, where you're going to hear from several organisations from various sectors and of varying size on how they have successfully incorporated aspects of the national standards for volunteer involvement into their organisation. Before we do that, we're going to run a poll, so you'll need your phone and Slido or laptop or PC if you're joining us from elsewhere, whatever, or you can use your phone if you're joining us from elsewhere. And you will see the poll question there with the question, what's your current understanding of the national standards for volunteer involvement? Now, we can't see, this is completely anonymous. So we would like you to be honest in placing yourself on that scale. What is your current understanding of the national standards? And then we'll pop the results up on the screen. Everyone see? Oh, there it is. There we go. See? Live voting. Where's Anthony Green? This is great. And obviously the more of you that vote, up to 83 of you so far, 85 have voted. There we go. I was about to say I think we can declare the winner, but I don't know. Four's coming in strong at the end. 130 of you have now voted. That's the problem with showing results midway through market research. Like, I've studied market research. It's a bad thing to show people because then they go, oh, same as talkback radio. Someone rings and says, the sky's not blue. And of course, the person who wants to say it's blue then picks up the phone and then it totally throws. Look at that. All right, 150 votes. We seem to have settled on 3. It's awarded it's a 3, but I'm going to say it's a coalition that we've elected of 3 and 4 out of 5. There, who was it? Who was it? All right, that's good. That's good. That's good. I think you'd be happy with that, would you, Jane? I mean, plenty of people are saying we're a modest lot. I'm sure, really, there's probably a little bit more that way, but that's pretty good. Well, we're going to start this session with Vicki Meyer. She's the 2024 recipient of the Queensland Award for Excellence in Volunteer Management. She's going to introduce the session and then share her insights on the importance of embedding volunteering in an organisation's leadership, governance and culture. Vicki has over 20 years' experience in the not-for-profit sector, accumulating a diverse skill set across operations, public speaking, leadership, governance, human resources, workplace health and safety, training and development and volunteer programs. She was the recipient of Volunteering Queensland's Excellence in Volunteer Management Award last year, as well as a Leadership for Transformation Scholarship with the Institute of Community Directors and a Certified Professional Leader of Volunteers with VQ. She serves as a board director at Story Dogs and is also on the management committee for Friends of the Koala. She's passionate about promoting volunteering across Queensland and empowering volunteer-involving organisations to build safe, inclusive, positive and innovative volunteer programs. To speak on the topic, Introduction and Shifting the Lens, Embedding Volunteering in Leadership, Governance and Culture, please welcome Vicki Meyer.
Hello everyone. What a fantastic start to the day we had, and I was saying to a few people in the break, I really don't know how I can make standards seem, and they are cool, but really cool after everyone we've heard from today. And I must admit, my mind got a little bit distracted by mud cake and red frogs. And true story, I now hide my snacks from my husband because he will raid them. So Nathan, I wonder if Kate had a strategy of putting the milk in front of the mud cake from you as well. So welcome everyone. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge the Turrbal people and Yagara people on whose land we gather today, whose culture, history and traditions have shaped our region. I acknowledge the connection First Nations people across this wonderful state and Australia have to our wildlife, the landscape and the water in which I live, work and play. I pay respects to ancestors, past, present and emerging leaders, and acknowledge any First Nations delegates who might be joining us in person or online today. So welcome. Thank you so much for that poll. I'm going to spend a short time with you today because we have some amazing speakers who are going to share some great case studies and real-life practical examples that you can utilise in your organisation. And I will warn Andrew, you're probably going to need to ring the bell for me. So let's go on the journey to get today. So you would have seen from the poll, we've got a really good understanding of national standards here in the room, which is fantastic. Can anyone tell me how many standard areas there are? 8. Oh, perfect. I don't have any prizes, sorry. But thank you, that's fantastic. There are 8. And so the national standards are a best practice framework. And they were developed originally in 2015 through Volunteering Australia and Volunteering Victoria and adopted nationally with all the state peak bodies. In 2023, they had a refresh to reflect the contemporary volunteering landscape that we find ourselves in here today. And I must admit, I was a little bit scared by Nathan's statistics that we are one generation away of volunteering no longer being part of our community. That really is a reality check for me. So today I'm going to take you through some of the standards as well as Standard 1. And my aim for you today is to walk away empowered, inspired and ready to ignite your either journey with the national standards or to continue your progress in the national standards. So let's begin. More recently, as I said, the standards were refreshed and I have on the screen, just in case you don't remember them all, we have all the standard areas here. So Standard 1, volunteer leadership is embedded in leadership, governance and culture. Volunteer participation is championed and modelled. We have volunteer roles are meaningful and tailored, and we heard this morning from Paris, from David, Nathan, and also Andy how important that is. You know, let's make roles meaningful not only for the youth, but of volunteers of all ages. Recruitment is equitable and diversity is valued. Volunteers are supported and developed, and volunteer safety and well-being is obviously protected in the organisation. And volunteers are recognised, and policies and practices are continuously improved. So, how do we use the standards? So I'm going a little bit fast to just bring those up for you. The standards, the great thing about the national standards is, as I mentioned, it's a benchmarking framework for you all to use in your organisation. Doesn't matter how small your organisation is or how large, how multi-site you might be, perhaps you're 100% operating by volunteer support. The great thing is you can adapt it to your organisation, your needs and your volunteer program. It's very flexible. It also complements other laws and framework. So it works in synergy with the aged care standards, with the child safety framework, and also anti-discrimination laws. And of course, I'm a bit of a safety nerd, workplace health and safety as well. So you might be thinking, okay, we've done some work on the standards, or perhaps you're starting on your journey, you're not quite sure, okay, what's the benefit? Who is a little bit time poor? Who's wearing many hats in their organisation? Exactly. So it might be, look, Vicki, you know, this sounds really great. I've heard of the national standards, or perhaps I didn't until today. I really want to make a difference, but we just don't have time. We don't have time to do this. We're trying to get more volunteers, or we're trying to steal the volunteers from Nadine. You know, we're trying to improve, we're trying to engage, we're getting on TikTok. You know, it's such a busy life in the world of a volunteer leader. You can start as small or as big as you want to. It's not like you're going to be audited and fined by Volunteering Queensland if you don't have the standards in place. But what they're there for is to help you build a volunteer program that means that your volunteers are recognised and supported, and that you're supported in your role to enable that as well. And by doing that, as Andy mentioned earlier, you can create change through these standards. You can adapt these standards to help engage young people, or whatever demographic that you're looking for. And I find that's exciting. I know it might be a bit weird, but it's exciting. We can create change with these standards. But if you wanted to talk a little bit more of a practical tool, you can use the standards to help improve your practice. You can use the standards to audit your gaps. So you might be saying today, I don't know where to start. Do a gap assessment. Look at your volunteer feedback. What has been coming through to your organisation? That's a great start to work with the standards. Has anyone got position descriptions in their organisation for their volunteers? Great. Do you all recognise and reward your volunteers? Might be in different ways. Fantastic. You're already working towards meeting or exceeding the standards. So well done. We'll just give you, that's a lot of work. You're making a start, which is fantastic. So well done. But you can audit what's happening. What are those gaps? You can use it to help build innovation. You can use it to help build the programs and the interaction and the volunteer experience that you want as an individual, because I know most of you volunteer outside of your role, but also the experience you want your volunteers to have. We want them to keep coming back. We want the retention. You can use the national standards to help you achieve that. So you can use it to help with that, and also action. So it's great having these frameworks, but do up an action plan. Where do you take the theory and embed that with the practice as well? So make the national standards work for you. And that's a big thing I want you to take away today. So who should use the standards? Look, personally, I feel everyone should. It's free, it's accessible to you all. It really does come down to your time and resources. So I don't want you going away today thinking, I didn't know about the national standards, or we know and we've implemented some things, but we just can't get ahead with evolving right now because, you know, Cyclone Alfred or whatever might have been happening. Rome wasn't built in a day. It just takes that small step and that small change to help grow your program and best practice and benchmark against the standards. So organisations who are regional, rural, remote can obviously access the standards. If you're a multi-site organisation that perhaps is located all across Australia, the standards still apply to you. It could be that you're 100% operated by volunteers as well. The standards apply to every volunteer involving organisation. It's just, as I mentioned, how do you make them work for you? I also love to say I've come from a background in my more recent role with virtual volunteers, and so you have to get a bit creative with the standards, particularly around recognising and rewarding volunteers who aren't on site. So don't be afraid to get creative as well and network with your peers to see how they're meeting or benchmarking against the standards. And they're scalable, so you can scale up, you can build upon them, and you can review them. So I really do think they're fantastic. But anyway, I'm not being paid to say that, I should just mention. So look, what are the benefits? You might be saying, once again, heard of the standards, you might have experienced some of the benefits yourself, might have improved the volunteer experience already. It can provide clarity and purpose. You are saying how you're going to engage volunteers, you are dedicating resources to support those volunteers, and you have clear intention. Those volunteers then come into your organisation and are connected with the why that we've been hearing about so much today. Why should I volunteer with you? What sort of leadership or opportunities can that provide and open to me as well? Obviously, it gives you a great tool to look at reward and recognition as well, and how you can expand that to really engage the volunteers of today and the volunteers of tomorrow as well. Mitigate risk, and I'll talk a little bit about this with the board, but the standards help you to mitigate some of the risk because you're working in line with legislation such as anti-discrimination. I was talking to someone today about policies, but who has some policies specific to your volunteer program? I know probably Nadine does, yes. Great, so once again, you're already working towards meeting or exceeding the standards, so well done. It can help you to provide best practice for your volunteer program as well, and the real safety and support mechanisms as well. We love the standards, no. Oh, fantastic. So as I said, chances are you're probably already meeting or exceeding the standards today. So walking away today, before we get into hearing some really practical case studies, anyone who is working on the standards, what might be a key challenge you're facing? Is it time resources? Yeah, not knowing where to start? We often talk about, and we heard it this morning, volunteers or potential volunteers don't know where to start. How do I find a role? You know, that's why word of mouth and advertising is so important. But it can be the same with the standards. It can seem overwhelming, and it can be, well, where do I start? It might just be you in the department. You might have a whole team. So don't be overwhelmed. Volunteering Queensland and all your peers here today are here to support you on that journey as well. So we're going to have a look at Standard 1, just briefly before we hand over to our amazing speakers coming up today as well. So Standard 1 is embedding volunteering is embedded in leadership, governance and culture. Now, raise your hand if you feel comfortable. You know, you might be with your CEO today, might not feel comfortable. But raise your hand if you've ever really had to fight for something with your volunteer program. I saw a hand go straight away before I finished. It could be a budget. Who has fought for maybe some budget for reward and recognition or volunteer t-shirts or whatever that case may be? And this is why it's so important that the leaders of your organisation, not only they want to engage volunteers, and I often hear that boards and senior leaders, they want volunteers. They genuinely love volunteers. I told you I would go over clock. They genuinely love them and they want them as part of the organisation, but they don't necessarily delve deeper to that. And this is how you can use the standards to help with that. We need to get boards and senior leaders involved around things like the national standards, understanding more, being involved in the volunteer strategy. And one of the things that I've worked on with one of my boards is we have a subcommittee which is the Performance, Remuneration and Governance Committee. And as part of that, volunteers and the volunteer program is in that committee. And so at a board level, we're talking more and more about the strategy for volunteers and making sure we're aligning with the people on the ground, you who are leading. So we've got some practical tips here that you can do as well that I want to help inspire you to support your board. You get some committees, whether that is on your board or you have an advisory committee amongst your volunteer leadership team. We heard about getting volunteers involved and younger perspectives. Get them on an advocacy group and help them guide you with the national standards as well. But I've got some more tips in there as well. Record keeping is a big part of this standard as well. So it might be looking at Rosterify. Once again, I'm not being paid by Rosterify. But it might be looking at some kind of CRM to help you with the record keeping. But go to your board. Present to your board if your senior leadership will support you in that. Have a subcommittee that is totally focused on your volunteer governance. We need to, as organisations, come together and get our senior leaders focused on the daily operations in terms of a governance strategy so we don't become a generation away of losing our volunteers. So we've got some other practical tips on there to get your board involved, but also your organisation. I've worked for some organisations. Every new staff member has to have an induction with volunteer services because many people who joined in the organisation I was with were coming from corporate backgrounds, from health backgrounds, and they had never worked with volunteers before. So we want to set them up to succeed when working with volunteers. So lots of different tips on there as well. Running a little bit out of time, but where to start? So from today, what you can do, slow is fast. So don't be overwhelmed that you've got to do this all today. Take it slow, take it easy, get that impact and work out the why. Why do you want to implement the standards? How do you want to go about it? And who do you need to come on the journey with you? And my biggest tip would be getting volunteers also involved in that. You want the voices of your volunteers to help shape that future strategy for you as well. And make it fun. We heard, maybe it was from Andy, we heard today, make it fun. National standards can be fun. This is an opportunity for, I know you're thinking, Vicki, you're crazy, but it can be fun. Make it fun. Make it a team building experience where you can have a chance to review what is working for your volunteer program and what isn't. So today I want you to leave feeling the standards inspire you to create change for your volunteers. They empower you to empower the volunteers of today and tomorrow, and ignite the enthusiasm across your organisations that volunteers are the heart of our state, the heart of your organisation, but let's create change and support them in new ways so we have flexible volunteering and opportunities, and the standards can help you achieve all of that. So before I get another ring of the bell, I will leave it there. You're going to hear some amazing practical tips and strategies coming up as well. So thank you for spending a little bit of brief time with me today, just to have a bit of a refresh on the national standards, but looking at how you can help your board and senior leadership get on the national standards train and create change for tomorrow. So thank you.
At this point, I might mention that because there's a lot of information there and you may be trying to sort of write it all down. Recordings of all the sessions will be made available to you after the conference. So you don't need to sort of, jot it all down. Feel free to take photos, obviously, but recordings of every session will be available. Okay, let's hear some of these case studies, and we start with Erin Davis and creating community with cake. What is it with cake today? The third mention of cake. Erin is the president of Community Cake and is putting the town of Marburg on the map through cake. She's the creative director of the Great Marburg Bake Off, a country show-like competition that utilises every community hall in town and boasts hundreds of decorated biscuits, dozens of homemade cakes, as well as brass bands, barbershop singers, the occasional maypole, and cake-based art. After the outrageous success of their first event, Erin and her small but mighty group of core volunteers became Community Cake Inc., and she now heads up the committee as president. She loves working with like-minded, community-focused people and is passionate about providing an exceptional volunteer experience. Hilariously, Erin hasn't been able to eat gluten for 18 years. But that hasn't stopped her from going full steam ahead on a cake-based event series throughout the year that brings joy and bunting to town. Please welcome Erin Davies.
I wasn't nervous until right about now, but it's quite strange hearing your bio read back to you. Yes, I am celiac, so see me about the gluten-free lunch. It was excellent. Thank you very much. It's also my first time using a clicker, so let's see how it goes. Green for forward, red for back. Excellent. Look, if we're only stuck on this photo, it's not terrible. Hi everybody, I am Erin and I'm the self-appointed president of Community Cake Incorporated. And as you can see, I have been enamoured with cake from a very young age and the joy that it brings. This is my mum, who wasn't really happy that I almost cut all of her head off. But this is a woman's weekly cake. It's my first birthday. It's pretty rad. And I guarantee right now that you're thinking about your own birthday cakes and every one that you've had throughout the years. So, cake chat, however it may come, makes everyone's eyes light up. There is always a story attached to cake, be it about a baking disaster, a choice made out of the Women's Weekly Kids cookbook that came to life, or a tale about show cookery and the rosettes associated with a winning sponge entry, or one that didn't even make it to the show, perhaps. So, with all of that in mind, in 2021, after COVID had a detrimental effect on our local show cookery section, I decided to simply have a fun cake competition in our delightful little town of Marburg that I hope you've all had the opportunity to visit, even not on a bake-off day. Every single person that put their hands up to be involved had a long history of volunteering at various organisations, as have I. And my only non-negotiable, again as a self-appointed leader, was that this event was going to be joyous, an absolutely joyous thing to be part of. We had a brainstorming session at the local pub and noted the positives and negatives we all had encountered over the years. And some of the stories, as I'm sure everyone in this room can attest, can be pretty, like a very poorly baked cake, very, very, very bad. And they can also be incredibly great. So we committed to sticking with the best ones. So, our meetings are held at the local pub and jobs are divided up by area of interest to each person. The goal was to have at least 40 entries across 4 categories for the first year, with a day run by a small group of delightful volunteers. The local community rallied around the idea and offered their time, sponsorship and in-kind support, and their general cheerleading, which saw the numbers of entries go to 122, which was a lot of cake. And it was at our debrief, again at the pub, there's a strong theme here, after the last cake board had been washed and returned to its rightful owner, that we decided to become an incorporated association and to become members of Volunteering Queensland. In the year between 2021 and 2022, we started on the standards for volunteer involvement. And while we are chipping away at the 8 standards, I'll focus today on standards 2 and 3. So, first up, standard number 2. Volunteer participation is championed and modelled. Any chance we get, we publicly celebrate our volunteers on socials, in interviews, been on ABC radio a few years ago, it was very fun, media releases and at other events. We proudly declare the fact that without our volunteers, there would be no bake-off or community cake for that matter. And by reiterating our dedication to a welcoming, supportive and enjoyable environment at the pub, we have attracted volunteers who share our goals. This is our 2nd year, and as you can see, we levelled up our uniform game. The most asked question of this year's bake-off was, how can I get a pink apron? This interest led to developing a volunteer application form. Previously it had just been whether you're related to me. Everyone in my family except 2 of my children who were actually doing jobs are in that photo. So previously it was all family and who you know and whether you were at the pub for dinner, and we roped you in. So we got a volunteer application form on our website, and it's been really well used, and it's seen us gain volunteers from outside of our local community, which in turn brings an even wider range of skills to our group. 2023, God, they're a good looking bunch, aren't they? 2023 saw us gain family members of our regular volunteers, extra family, as a way for them to spend time together and give back to their community, which has been a really, really special outcome for the event. We also invite our volunteers to give us feedback on their experience of their training in the lead up to the bake-off and their thoughts on the day, which in turn helps us set goals for the next year. Standard number 3, volunteer roles are meaningful and tailored. With the success of the bake-off year on year, we have found that our volunteers have offered their skills to our organisation that could enhance our day. While there are specific roles, of course, that need to be filled, there's always room for expansion according to the things that our volunteers love. Back in 2022, saw us at an art show after one of our new volunteers somewhat sillily, just casually mentioned she would happily take on an art show as a project. So we held her to that, and Let Them Art Cake was born, and lets people express their love of baked goods through art. And our curator, Beck, also offered to mentor some volunteers that expressed an interest in art show curation, which also turned out to be an unexpected offering. We always team our new volunteers with people that have done a bake-off job the year before, and that has not only increased our skills base as a group, but has seen new friendships forming that have carried on outside our one-day event. These two didn't know each other, they were teamed together, and now they hang out quite regularly. And Deb on the right lives in Brisbane. She travelled to us for the day, she was so keen, and Trish is one of our local volunteers who embroiders all of our aprons for us. And they are a fab little team now. The feedback has been really good around this, and with the overwhelming sentiment being one of being welcomed and being made to feel part of the team as soon as they arrive. Some of our volunteers have even become volunteers at different organisations through their new friendships outside of our local area. Another way we've worked to make our volunteers feel at home with us is to have name badges made for each volunteer by a local artist that also volunteers her time and skills and materials, and they get to keep it. We also brief our photographer to get an individual photo of everyone that joins us on the day. We then send their photo to them after the big day with a personalised thank you note. The day is really busy, there's a lot of cake, and our volunteers deserve to see themselves contributing to its success. And in full disclosure, that's my dad on the end, but that's my aunt. This is great. We have a photo of every volunteer from every year, and it's so nice, and they do always look very happy. So probably the most novel way our roles have been tailored have been to have our volunteers become our judges for our People's Choice category. Once all the slices have been de-identified from the baker that entered them and they're in the hall, the doors are closed. The windows are closed. It's very secret business in there. And this actually came about because the first year, hoping we would get 10 entries, we had one judge to narrow it down to the top 5, and that judge just never turned up. So all of a sudden it was we weren't in an SES boat looking for body parts, but thank God for that. But this is the main hall in town, and we shut the windows and we're like, oh, because I can't eat any cake either. So everyone picks a slice. And yes, we had 42 entries. So it was a calamity of cake, and it was great. And it's turned into this fantastic role that people want to be in this hall, to be on the panel. So I digress. But once all they're in, all the windows are shut, the team gets together and they team up to work down, narrowing it to the top 5. And they work together then to cut the slices all up, and the public can then buy a box of the top 5, and they vote with a little whisk. So that's People's Choice. Because also everyone, anytime you talk about cake, says, I could be a cake judge. And you're like, well, actually, it's very serious, but sure. And I suspect this may be one of the top drivers for people wanting to be a possessor of a pink apron. Having the national standards for volunteer involvement to work towards really has helped us define Community Cake's objectives. And just because we are a small group that come together for a few events through the year doesn't mean we can't conduct ourselves with professionalism, and I do truly believe it contributes to how our community and the wider reach perceives us. Volunteering is the glue that holds small communities like ours together, and to have Volunteering Queensland to be a member of is super valuable. While we do want the Great Marburg Bake Off to be a wonderful event for our community to attend, but the thing we want to be known for even more than cake is that we are all part of an excellent volunteering experience. Thank you so much for having me. Happy conference.
I thought you were going to say there's a piece of cake under everyone's chair, but no. When's it on? When? What day? When?
The 29th of September. If you want pink
Okay, 29th of September. Now to Embedding Volunteer Voices, a joint presentation by Jelly McAuliffe-Bunker, who's the volunteer engagement facilitator at ChaplainWatch, and Nicole Ashley, the volunteer strategy project officer at Play Matters Australia. As you'll hear, Jelly speaks with such passion and joy about the privilege of volunteering, that incredible way to connect with others and engage with communities from the niche to the multinational. Supporting ChaplainWatch teams, as she does across central and southern Queensland, Jelly is excited to tell you today about the recently launched Volunteer Voices group. This initiative partners well with Jelly's passion for attentive listening to others, the topic of her doctoral studies. Nicole oversees the engagement and support of over 300 volunteers of Play Matters Australia, or PMA, across Queensland. Since 2023, she's led a project to integrate the national standards for volunteer involvement into all aspects of PMA's operations, ensuring a sustainable, high-quality volunteer program. Please welcome both Jelly and Nicole.
Thank you. And it's just been an incredible day so far. And okay, so we will be speaking about embedding volunteer voices. But firstly, I just want to explain about volunteer voices. As we've heard earlier, knowing what your volunteers want to say is really important. And that actually fits really well with our 4 ChaplainWatch values, which are people matter, intentional intervention, so of course we intentionally intervene to hear what our volunteers want to say, being divinely led, and owning responsibility. So we're opening the opportunity for volunteers to be able to share what they feel responsible for. So while volunteer advisory group is the normal naming of a similar group to our volunteer voices, I feel that volunteer voices engages better because it speaks to the mutuality of all of us speaking and having a voice. And so we have a voice at the table rather than this sense of separation of a group over here who's advising us. They're part of who we are. We're investing into them and they're investing into us. So this is why we've called our ChaplainWatch Volunteer Voices Group. So as mentioned, green one? Okay. Yes, so as mentioned, I'm the volunteer engagement facilitator, which sounds like a really long name, for walking beside the volunteer managers. So I don't organize rosters, like Rosterify, or I have done in the past, or any of those management details. And so crafting a volunteer voices group was really important to not interfere with the volunteer management framework, but to be able to work well with them. And I just love the revised national standards, which gives so much of a voice to volunteers. So where previously the national standards would look at what's good for the organization, now we say, what would work well for our volunteers? How can we make it a really good space for our volunteers? And that just warms my heart. So, as I said, ChaplainWatch is where I'm the volunteer engagement facilitator. And if you're not familiar with the ChaplainWatch, we're almost the opposite of Play Matters, because while they engage with children, we engage with adults. While they will serve by day, we serve by night in the entertainment precincts. So from 10 p.m. through to 4:30 a.m. on weekends, our volunteers are in Brisbane, Sunshine Coast, Bundaberg, Gladstone, and Rockhampton. And they are serving as equal team members with staff, and we have volunteers from age 18 through to 70. And we have in number approximately 80 volunteers across the whole state. And it is just wonderful encouragement to see the enthusiasm, dedication that they bring to the role, and that they will be on shift every weekend in some cases, around, in some cases, around paramedic placement or around other study commitments, and in some cases around family commitments. So yes, I love the role that I do with ChaplainWatch. Thank you.
Hello. Okay, so I'm Nicole. I am the project officer for the volunteer strategy at Play Matters Australia. So predominantly, we support volunteer-led playgroups across the state. We're in 51 of the 77 local government areas. We have 300 volunteers and 158 volunteer-led playgroups in those spaces. We're across so many regions that some of the issues that we've faced is that we have to be equitable in our approach to volunteers, but what we do for a volunteer in Brisbane can't look the same as someone who is in Roma or Mount Isa, because obviously there's a distance, we can't get there, we can't personally go visit their playgroups and things like that. As an organisation, we've been in these communities for over 50 years doing what we're doing, and we've always had the best of intentions with embedding volunteer voices, getting ideas, getting feedback, surveys, all those things. There's been a disconnect historically for us between what we do with the feedback that we get and how we act on the feedback that we get. And so for us, we set up, we call it our steering group. So we have volunteers and volunteer managers in our steering group. And the idea is that we integrate their voices as we're creating change and not after the fact and then coming back and changing things again because we didn't consult them to start with. So Jelly and I have 5 tips on how you might be able to integrate volunteer voices by creating a steering group, a volunteer voices group, an advisory group, whatever you would like to call it. Yeah, it's not working. There should be. You're going to get it now, the first go. Yeah. I knew that would happen. Okay, so just some practical tips on how to set up a steering group. What did you do? Yeah. The other big green one. Okay, it's okay. Okay, so the first thing that's really practical and helpful is to get leadership endorsement. So at my organisation, what that looked like was speaking to my manager, creating a terms of reference, passing that up to the CEO for the CEO to look at with our senior leadership team, and receiving feedback on that and getting an endorsement of a terms of reference. So that outlined the recruitment strategy, who we were targeting, how many people we wanted, how often we were going to meet, when and where we were going to meet, what we might be discussing, all of those sorts of things, so that we had a framework to go from to begin with.
And from there, once we had a plan, and I had discussed with our leadership in ChaplainWatch, and they were incredibly enthusiastic. But I also needed to speak to the volunteer managers to make sure that I wasn't crossing over into their workspaces and not creating division between them and their volunteers. So I reached out through that network to invite expressions of interest for any volunteers who wanted to be part of this volunteer voices group. So that they would have a voice. And I was also conscious of the fact that timing was important. So these were people who were already giving their time, so I didn't want to monopolize their time, so it needed to be an expression of interest from them. I also wanted to set out clear parameters around the amount of time. So in our case, with the volunteer managers, who are our team leaders, we worked out that 60 minutes per quarter seemed reasonable. That would be for an online meeting because we meet across 5 different precincts. But in addition to that, because I wanted their input also to the remainder of the national standards, I set a 60 minutes offline over the whole year. So when they were signing up, they knew exactly what it would look like and how much the time commitment was. Now, actually getting people together to commit to a particular date, because of course life happens, and Alfred happens, and placements happen, and family happens. But we did successfully have one volunteer meeting, and it was just incredibly positive. We were able to speak together. We were also able to prompt the team leaders to be prepared and to bring any issues to their representatives so that they could bring it up at our meeting, as well as then, after the fact, being able to share our successes with the team leaders. I think it's you.
Hey. Okay. The third tip that we have is building connections and recognising value. So for me, in this process, I did interviews with all of the volunteers who had expressed an interest to be a part of our steering group. The interview had two purposes. One was to see if it was a good fit to have them in the group, and that they could commit to what was being asked of them, but also it was really to make a point of connection and to start building that relationship. I think relationship is so important, and I know it takes time and resources, which we often don't have, but time in itself is enough of a resource sometimes. And so for me, with the building connections, once we had established who was going to be in our steering group, I sent out a little welcome note with a packet of Tim Tams and some tea bags to say, can't wait to see you at our first meeting, reminder that it's at this time. I think it was the Tim Tams that got people to the first meeting.
Yes, so as mentioned, it is important for us to understand the investment that they are bringing, and so we're transparent about that. But also, we need to dig deep into what they are looking for so that we understand clearly, so we're not making assumptions about what they're requiring as part of their investment. And at the same time, to not bring packed agendas, sort of attempting to manipulate the volunteer voices. We want to be fully transparent about, we want to hear your voices, and then to take that and work as best we can to what you're proposing, but the answer to that could still be a no. And it's just having that transparency.
So I'll just make one last point. So in action, what you plan for it to look like and what it looks like may not even be cousins with each other. So I had a terms of reference and I had all these lovely plans, and we're sort of 6 months into running our steering group now, and we've had one volunteer drop off with absolutely no contact, and we didn't have as many volunteers as we wanted initially, and so we adapted the terms of reference to include the managers, like the volunteer managers as well. And so I would say, just when you take this on, set your standards high and then be Play-Doh and just mould with whatever is thrown at you. Because even if something sticks, that's better than nothing. So, thank you.
Oh, sorry, guys. 2 last things. 1, listen well. 2, don't overpromise. Thank you.
Okay, Salty Otton is going to tell you about Accessible Zeds. Salty is the volunteer coordinator and rhinestone cowgirl at 4ZZZ FM. Through the generous funding from Volunteering Queensland, they were able to create the successful framework for more people living with disability to volunteer at 4ZZZ. Salty recognises the value and joy that volunteering can bring not only to an organisation, but also, and she would argue more importantly, the volunteer. Salty lives with early onset Parkinson's, arthritis and Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, but this has not stopped her from living a full life. Salty Otton.
G'day. I'm going to walk around a bit. I've got really bad dyskinesia today. Who's heard of 4ZZZ? Who subscribes? Yeah, I know you two do. Okay, I've got some people to turn. So when I was thinking about what I was going to talk to and how it all fits into the standards, I figured, even though 4ZZZ is very diverse, that there's always room for more diversity. But, oh, come on. Oh, yeah, no, it's the other green one. Before I start, I want to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands on which 4ZZZ broadcasts from and from where I wrote this report, the Turrbal, Yagara and Jagara people. I'd like to extend my respects to elders past, present and those to come. Sovereignty was never ceded and we live and work on stolen land. None of my fun animations came through. So, a little bit about me. Prior to this funding, I volunteered as the volunteer coordinator at 4ZZZ. I have a long history of volunteering. I've been volunteering since just before I was a teenager. I live with advanced early onset Parkinson's. I have psoriatic arthritis, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, and I'm neurospicy. It's like a country and western song. Now, before all of these diagnoses, it's always been incredibly important to me to include people who might not usually get included. People with disability. I've heard so many of you talk about how you're having trouble finding volunteers. Well, let me tell you, there's a whole group of people who've been forgotten about for most of their lives. And it's an untapped market. And we're keen and we're eager. But without the funding from Volunteering Queensland, we could not have run such a program. And for that, I'll be eternally grateful for, because we changed lives. And I'm pretty stoked that I can say that. So, how many of you know? I'm just going to assume you don't know much of the history. So, 4ZZZ came into existence in 1975. It was one of the last things that the wonderful Gough Whitlam signed off on. Which is pretty cool. We strive to amplify the voices of our communities. People living with disability are often unheard. We're often kept under the stairs. Pretty uncomfortable when you're my height. And they don't get the opportunity to volunteer because people don't think we can. Do I have news for you? 4ZZZ really strives to amplify so many different communities. And I was really hell-bent on amplifying those of my community. The cocktail shakers of this world. And not only that, educate our current volunteers about disability. Like, disability shit. But with other support and teaching people that we shouldn't be kept under the stairs, gets a bit better. And I've just pretty much said that, but I'll say it again. We wanted to increase the representation of people living with disability and make the volunteering process easier. Not everyone has the ability to type. Not everyone can see to type. Not everyone can operate a panel. I struggle at the best of times. But it's really important that you include us. We're 25%. sorry I'm pacing so much, but like living in this body, I can't stop moving at the moment, and I'm nervous, so. So what did we achieve? We inducted 68 people living with disability at 4ZZZ. I'll show a photo later, but this fine gentleman here, Andrew Bartlett, ran an induction from our St Paul's Terrace entry studio for a bunch of folks in wheelchairs. Because I don't know if you've been to the 4ZZZ building. It ain't accessible. We trained 26 of these new volunteers in broadcasting. 4 of those successfully applied for a show on Zed Digital, as well as more being part of a compilation show called Incubators, run by Owen up the back there, who is filming me like a creep. We made some disability awareness videos because it's important. You know, when do you able-bodieds think that it's appropriate to step in and help us? One day I'll find someone to carry me up those stairs, but for now I can kind of manage. We created a new section on our 4ZZZ wiki, which is for volunteers only. You can check it out. Come volunteer and subscribe. It has 18 entries. And I extensively shared our learnings from our project, specifically with FBI and 2SCR in Sydney. Sydney's a horrible city. I lived there for a time. Oh, here they are. So we started from a standing start. We did have one show on a Sunday lunchtime. We have one show on Sunday lunchtime run by people living with disability about disability matters. But other than that, that was it. Sunday inductions and Bris Vegas weather in summer, they don't mix. A lot of us living with disability, we're a little bit sensitive to the heat. We were originally going to run our disability awareness workshop. We were originally going to have the videos as workshops, but instead of doing that, we thought, well, why don't we just make them into videos? People can watch it at home. It's more accessible. You know, look at that, us thinking about you able bodies. You know, I wish I had more time. I really do. And I know I'm running out of time, and don't ring me, Andrew. Feedback. Now, I'm not a crier. I'm really not, but I cried at my desk when I got these. It's been 5 months since I commenced training and became a 4ZZZ volunteer. I always feel so welcome and appreciated. Being a 4ZZZ volunteer, I guess, gives me a greater sense of purpose and sparks my creativity and strengthens my feeling of being an important part of a diverse community. You can catch the person who left that feedback on a Sunday night, I believe it was 4 p.m. on Zed Digital. Great show. Cool for cats. May have been interviewed for it. On our Sunday inductions, this one made me laugh. The most welcoming house party ever. We set up trestle tables. We had a barbecue going. It was a nice vibe. I know you're going to ring me again, Andrew. Few things can get me out of bed, and much less stressed in the early hours of Saturday. But I am filled with a sense of pride when I catch the bus, then the train, over to 4ZZZ in Fortitude Valley to record an episode of my show, High Fidelity. I am incredibly grateful to be part of the community. That person didn't think that they were worthy of being part of 4ZZZ. Lucas, he's at every gig in Brisbane. If you've been to a gig, you've seen him. And ongoing success. Got to race through these. Look, everyone who is trained and actively want to have a show, has one or is part of one, doing regular fill-ins on the FM band, actually enlisting Lucas to interview one of my favourite American bands in the not-too-distant future. We have 5 Zed digital programs hosted by people living with disability. We've partnered with a couple of organisations like Empower Autism so that people living with disability can come and do work experience. And we had one, I don't want to say kid because it's so patronising, but he was a lot younger than me, had a passion for Australian dance music, EDM, as they call it. He went through and discovered a lot of things weren't linking up in our music library. We now have a very, very extensive Australian EDM section. 4ZZZ continues to support those volunteers living with disability who came to us through the Accessible Zeds program. But not only that, we see it as such a valuable part of our community that we're running our own. We're having another open day. We're doing accessible training. We want more of these voices to be heard because, we're sick of being under the stairs. There's Andrew right up the back there. Making a sting. Yeah, I hear ya. I just enjoy my animations. It's just a gift that keeps on giving. I worked really hard on these. To be able to change lives, to give people a voice who've never been heard before, to allow people to share their music loves. I'm going to cry again. That's Poppy. She does Pure Rumination. Brilliant show. And some inductions I've done with Orca through the studios. People hanging out. And feedback, you can contact me and I can do. Then that's in Sydney. I know I've got to get off the stage. And we couldn't have done any of this without the funding. We started from a standing start and we have created meaningful volunteering pathways for people living with disability. We've been able to create living documents to educate our volunteers about what it's like to live with a disability and how you can help someone with a disability. And developed and structured a plan to keep moving forward with making 4ZZZ more accessible. Thank you so much for having me.
Whoa, I heard that. They have a special relationship, obviously. That was terrific. do some work with an organisation called the Community Media Training Organisation, which Salty would know and Andrew would know. And if you haven't already, I think there's some other community stations around the country other than FBI and SER that need to hear that message. All right, now to Safecaring Volunteers and Belonging with DJ Cronin, a humanitarian and volunteer leadership specialist with 28 years experience, currently serving as the Response Workforce Specialist at the Australian Red Cross. He leads the development and engagement of Queensland's emergency response volunteer workforce. DJ's work focuses on creating a more peaceful world and helping organisations live their values. He combines mindfulness, authentic leadership and volunteerism to inspire positive change. Please welcome DJ Cronin.
He just said 10 minutes or Andrew will kill me. Was that it? Okay. And I'm here to talk about safety. Right. Not feeling too safe with you, Andrew, at the moment. What a hard act to follow. What an inspiring presentation. And can I just say, all of the speakers so far have been so inspiring and wonderful, because it is not an easy thing to get up on stage and speak to people. So let's put our hands together for them again. Before I begin, I would like to, on behalf of the Australian Red Cross, acknowledge the traditional owners of this land, their ancestors and elders, past and present. I'm here to talk about Standard 6, safety and well-being, but I'm also going to be touching on belonging, which is very important for volunteers as well. But before I begin, do you feel safe? You all feel safe? Yeah. I'm about to change that. So what is your understanding of safety? Okay, you almost ruined my next bit. So with safety, many people think it's about safety, being in a safe physical environment, safe procedures, etc., etc. I feel safe here. This platform looks safe. There's not going to be any accidents, I hope. I was trying the whole thing. I saw that, and then I thought, that must be safe. It must be safe. I used to be an actor for many, many years, and I've done many, many plays. And one of my first plays that I was in, my mom and dad were in the front row, and the boards that I were threading weren't exactly safe, and I actually fell through a hole. My dad turned to my mom in the front row and said, "Don't worry, he's just going through a stage." It's terrible, isn't it? Terrible. Ring the bell. That's why I don't do acting anymore. Okay. Okay, so there are many different levels of safety. So we've got physical safety, psychological safety, emotional safety, social safety, and moral safety. When we break that down, we're going to just look at some of those. So physical safety is our sense that our body and the bodies of our loved ones are not threatened in any way. Psychological safety is the sense we can express ourselves and be genuine without the threat of humiliation or judgment. Emotional safety is a sense that we can express or share our emotions freely without shame or punishment. Moral safety is a sense that we are surrounded by people who share similar values and a sense of right and wrong. So there's all types of safety. How many of you have done public speaking? Hands up. Okay, I'm going to pick somebody that hasn't and ask them to come up on the stage and join me and finish my presentation. Now, what does that do? That threatens somebody's psychological safety. I would never do that. So psychological safety is just as important as physical safety. Safety is vital for Australian Red Cross emergency services. As Safe Work Australia says, the organisation you volunteer for must talk or otherwise consult with you about work health and safety matters that affect you. This includes talking to you about potential hazards associated with your work and how the organisation is protecting you from harm. That's from Safe Work Australia itself. No reputable emergency agency would send untrained volunteers to a disaster response. The risks are simply too great. Training for emergency volunteers cover health and safety, working with vulnerable people, child protection, psychological first aid, emergency procedures, and a range of specific skills. We cannot send volunteers into the field without this training, regardless of how much experience that they may have in other fields. So some of the examples how we treat safety at Australian Red Cross include screening and interviews, also working with children and police checks. And the Safecaring involves ensuring volunteers are in the right place to safely undertake their roles. Psychological first aid training is a core part of our training. Remember, we send responders, volunteer responders, out into the community after disaster. We have been very, very busy this year, as you all know, and right now there are hundreds of Red Cross volunteers from emergency services out there in the field. Volunteers learn the latest internationally recognized evidence-based practice in psychological first aid, understand how to maintain their own well-being as well, which is very important. We have what we call a pre-deployment questionnaire that we do with volunteers before every event. I'd just like to talk to you a little bit about that. So the importance of the pre-deployment questionnaire. That's okay, I still feel safe. Okay, so even though volunteers have been trained, before every deployment, we use a pre-deployment questionnaire. So I've been talking to hundreds of volunteers over the last couple of months on the phone with a pre-deployment questionnaire, even though they may have been deployed in the past. Each new deployment is different. So we always thank the volunteers for putting their hand up to support our current response activity. Before deploying them, we run through some questions to ensure that they are able to be deployed at this time. That is because Australian Red Cross emergency services are committed to ensuring the health and well-being of Red Cross people before, during, and after their deployment. Volunteer well-being while undertaking their Red Cross role also has a direct impact on their ability to effectively support disaster-affected people and do no harm. The questionnaire is a prompt for volunteers to self-assess their own suitability for whatever disaster is happening right now by making an informed choice about their involvement. We do tell them that it is critical they answer the questions honestly for both their own well-being, their teammates' well-being, and the well-being of the community that they're going out to support. If we feel that they are not suitable for this particular deployment, we assure them that it is for their own safety and that future deployments are never affected further. We also do briefings in the field for every emergency services volunteer. That is with a team leader before they go out into the field, and then when they're finished their shift, a debriefing. All my notes got mixed up for some reason. Well, here we go. So every volunteer, and the standard talks about this, standard 6, who goes to work has the right to be protected by the organisation they volunteer for. They have a right to feel safe. In fact, they put their trust in you every day to keep them safe. That's why Standard 6 of the Australian National Standards on Volunteering is so important for organisations to understand. It's not just about reading those standards, it's about understanding them and applying them every day. I want to touch on a sense of belonging as well, because it's all about part of the psychological safety of your volunteers at work. As Brené Brown says, true belonging doesn't require you to change who you are. It requires you to be who you are. What does a sense of belonging involve? Diversity and inclusion. Everyone, no matter their background, their ability, how they identify, and their individual real self deserves respect. Volunteers should be representative of the communities in which we serve. We must be bold and state these principles in our recruitment campaigns, our brochures, and online. The voice of the volunteer gives the volunteer a say as well as a sense of belonging, which when we listen and take tangible actions on their feedbacks and concerns. Another example would be a volunteer representative group, excellent for reviewing volunteer recruitment campaigns, your website and social media posts on volunteers. They can co-design those with you. Wellbeing and feedback surveys, volunteer impact reports. Maybe don't just bury an impact report in an annual report. Have a volunteer impact report on its own. The volunteers will feel a sense of belonging if you can do that. Celebrate volunteers and recognise volunteers. How about you nominate a volunteer for the Queensland Awards coming up in May? Yes. Okay. Also, kindness in the workplace is very, very important for the psychological safety of volunteers. Kindness is more important than wisdom, and an understanding of that is the beginning of wisdom. I wish they were my words, but that's a quote from somebody called Theodore Rubin. And finally, belonging means invited, welcomed, known, accepted, involved, supported, heard, befriended, needed, present, and safe. Know this and watch your volunteer retention and growth rates blossom. Thank you for being here, for listening, and for helping your volunteers feel safe and cherished. They deserve nothing less. Thank you.
Before we hear from our final speaker before the break, just an important note that Volunteering Queensland offers training and support to help organisations to implement the national standards. You can visit the VQ website or talk to one of the VQ team here to find out more. Our final case study is Ready, Go, Set and the Power of Little Moments, presented by Brad Cooper, the CEO of Volunteering Gold Coast. Brad's been in not-for-profit organisations for most of his working life. He has more than 15 years' experience in senior operational and executive roles in human services organisations across Australia, but he began his career as a nurse, moving from hospitals into tertiary education and research, then transitioning to community aged care, homelessness services and mental health services. And he's also held volunteer roles as a board member and project roles developing professional practice standards. His focus is on outcomes and impact for service users and employees, drawing on the collective wisdom and insights across the organisation. Please welcome Brad Cooper.
Now I place my psychological safety in the hands of the crowd. Let's see how we go here. Thank you very much for having me. I stand between you and afternoon tea, or you and a nap, or waking you up from the nap that you might have been in. It's always a difficult spot on a program. Jane, I thought you liked me. I thought you loved me, but let's see how we go. Thank you very much. Let me just talk very quickly about Volunteering Gold Coast. We are a not-for-profit or a for-purpose organisation that believe heavily in the power of volunteering. And since 1998, we have connected around 60,000 people to volunteering opportunities across the Gold Coast. And we are a volunteer resource centre a very rare breed these days, for around 100 plus local volunteer involving organisation members. It's important to state that that activity, that volunteer resource centre activity, is actually not funded by or supported by any level of government at the moment. So it's an election year, there's an inquiry on. Please make that known. We're a significant volunteer involving organisation ourselves on the Gold Coast, with around 60 paid staff, 60 FTE paid staff that support about 200 volunteers across our activities of community transport, aged care volunteer visitor scheme, and accessible beaches, with around about $5 million turnover and an estimated contribution of about $1.6 million of donated volunteer labour each year. It's a significant amount, and based on the contracts that we have from the government and the rates that they pay us, we would not be able to remain viable without the support of volunteers. So volunteering for us is everything at Volunteering Gold Coast. It delivers social impact. It's got a multiplier effect. We know that volunteering changes lives, and we are looking to change volunteering. We're located on the Yugambeh lands of the Yugambeh speaking language people, and today I say Jingari to everyone here. We also have this idea that we want to encourage our volunteers. We value them very much, but wouldn't it be great if all of our volunteers actually volunteered for more than one organisation? Is that part of the solution? We think of ourselves as this idea of wanting to turn on the tap and seeing volunteers come out the tap, right? And in our world as a volunteer organisation, we are the hidden pipes. We are the bit which connects the volunteers, which hopefully fall from the sky as rain, land into the collection areas. And when people want to turn on their tap to have volunteers, we are part of that essential infrastructure to make volunteering happen. So I want to tell you a little bit about the way in which we recognise and support volunteers, and you're going to see oodles of images up here. And for me, my story of appreciation and recognition, my origin story starts with Gloria. And Gloria was the unit manager who supported me through my graduate year back in 1995, when I was at Box Hill Hospital in Victoria, went through 7 placements, 7 rotations in a year, and I had the opportunity to get one lot of feedback, and Gloria was my manager at the time. She was she was a very experienced unit manager, ferocious in terms of her advocacy for her staff, and often feared by people in terms of the bite that she might be able to inflict. And I was very lucky. I sat down one day and had a wonderful feedback session around a performance appraisal. Got a document that said you'd done a great job, measured me up against a bunch of criteria, much like the standards, said I was doing really well. But the one thing that was missing was the language from Gloria towards me. I just wanted her to say, Brad, I think you've done a really good job, right? And I didn't get it, so I left that session, and I went back in a couple of days, very courageous young nurse, took in my paper, and I said, look, I've just been reading over this, and I'm really chuffed by it, and waited. She said, that's nice, dear. And it left me with this profound effect that expressing your appreciation for what people do needs to be something that happens all the time. So Gloria was very supportive. She ran on a model of using game theory to get nurses to go off and compete to do different levels of higher education. I became caught up in that, sent me off on a wonderful pathway. But it also set me up with this idea that I wouldn't want to lead a team with fear or intimidation or power, that my journey would be to lead people with kindness. And that's the pathway that I've taken, to be an authentic leader that's using kindness. And most of the time it's worked pretty well. I can certainly tell you that it's burnt me a couple of times, but I'm still there, and that's the way we're going to play. So one of the things that's important for me is making sure that we use a principle of pumping up people's tyres before we need to take any air out of them. And that means being really open and acknowledging the things that people are doing well. So, in my world, if you're going to have a conversation with people about them not being punctual and coming up late, then you better have a check-in conversation, which is calling out the times that they've actually turned up early and done that little bit extra. If we're going to correct the gaps in people's work, then we want to also be able to acknowledge the things that they've done that were complete. We want to give people the tools that they need to succeed, and we want to give them great tools. In our world, we want to give volunteers perhaps the best tools that we've got in the organisation. We want to award We want to reward their generosity by giving them at least the right gear to do the job. Not just the right gear, but great gear. So we've got a volunteer at the moment who reached out to us and said, I really need a sit-stand desk. And we happen to have 2 sit-stand desks sitting in boxes ready to go, which was very, very lucky. And that desk was deployed within sort of 24 hours. And I thought that was pretty usual, but the feedback you'll get from volunteers, and volunteers are really rich about giving you insights from other organisations, was that that request had happened in another place, and after 6 months it hadn't been addressed, and so that person took their volunteering away from that organisation and came to us. It was a really simple win. We give people great IT hardware, good telephony, and we give them choice. If you're going to be using a telephone, then you can have a choice of 2 or 3 different headset types, whatever works for you. From time to time, we often try and do things that are a little bit larger. So one of the great things we'll do on the Gold Coast is our Gold Coast Volunteer Awards. We do this around International Volunteer Day in December. And this is a fabulous opportunity for the whole community to recognise volunteering, not just volunteering through Volunteering Gold Coast, but volunteering in all its glory. In a gala event, and there are some winners that are sitting here in the second row. Wayne from Cycling Without Age has been one of our winners. Went on to pick up an award at Volunteering Queensland's award as well, I believe. And this is a great opportunity to really celebrate. We had Jane there last year involved in the awards as well. And one of the things that I often say to people is there might only be 6 category winners that get celebrated through the evening, but one of the joys is being one of the 95 to 100 people that have actually been nominated. That conversation where you have to go up to someone and say, I think you're the duck's guts and I want to be able to put your name down here to say that you're worthy of being considered for this award. After everything's judged, I get the opportunity to sit down and read every single nomination, successful and unsuccessful. And I can tell you, in terms of an organisation that's trying to champion volunteering, it is incredibly rich as an experience. So do something grand. We also have a second experience that we often do in National Volunteering Week, which is to take all of our volunteers and take them out to the movies. So we have private hire of a movie cinema, about 200 seats. And usually it's a place where we often like to showcase a corporate video. Here's the great video of Volunteering Gold Coast in action, get the troops and rally them up. Well, last year we came into contact with a youth volunteer who'd been doing a project in India looking at microfinancing of cows for women who had very limited prospects. And that conversation took place and we decided that we would give up our space in the cinema and allow that film to have a public airing and screening, and gave up about 20% of the seats in the audience for that student to be able to bring connections, to connect with their journey around film production and take people on that space. And it was a really proud moment. The film was called More Than Milk. And it let us really showcase this idea that we were part of a bigger journey, and we certainly told everyone that we were letting that space to be made available for this greater good. There's a longer story that sits with this, is to watch this student who was volunteering, trying to get into film school, make a breakthrough, get into Bond University on a scholarship at the end of the year, and to see us kind of connected into that story. So it was a great example of going that recognition can be both within the organisation and outside of it. One of my favourite little tricks, and this is a real free one for everyone, is my practice around little notes. Right? So I have this really personal thing that I like to see happen in the organisation, which is we'll have a senior leadership meeting, and one of the topics will be, who do you think's gone the extra mile in the last week, the last fortnight? Who do you think saved our bacon in the last fortnight? And usually we'll get some nominations from the managers. Wouldn't really matter if we had 2, 3, 4 or 10. The response is similar. It starts a chain whereby someone will write to one of our volunteers. Sometimes it's an employee, and we will send them a message, and it'll say something like this: "Hi Flavia, your name came up today in today's leadership meeting in a good way, where the group was impressed by your service to various parts of Volunteering Gold Coast and the very friendly approach you've brought to your work. It's great to hear these comments, and we don't let our appreciation remain amongst only us. So a heartfelt thank you for being kind and a generous spirit to Volunteering Gold Coast, from Brad." Now that message gets copied into, I send the message, or someone else will send the message, and there'll be 2 other parts of the leadership team that'll be on that message at least, and we make a commitment to chime in and respond. So that single message then gets another message from one of my other one of my other leaders to say, hey, Flavia, you know, that's absolutely awesome. And the expectation I have is that maybe it's 2 sentences, but it has to be at least one. And it builds and gathers momentum as we go along. And it's had a really profound effect in terms of the response that we see from people. And it takes me back to my Gloria moment where people come back and say, I've not worked in a place where that simple expression has happened, and they're really, really touched by it. So that's my gift to the group, is to have a go at doing that. We try and do things like remember coffee orders, remember key milestones for people's children's, but more than that, we'll try and make sure that there is time that we allow for all of our staff, whether you're paid or a volunteer, it doesn't matter, to make sure that you're going to go and see your child get their reward. We try and connect them with those things to make sure that we are part of the organism that sits around people, their lives, their families, and of course we'll follow it up and say, you know, come back and show us the photo, or we might commemorate a significant loss that someone's had at the same time. So we do all ends of the spectrum. We pay attention to the differences in generation. We heard a little bit about this morning. We'll make sure that for different groups we'll focus on causes and values, particularly for those in our organisation that are millennials and Gen Zeds. So what do you think we can do better to support this outcome, change this issue in the community? We'll give praise for teams and their leadership as well, which speaks a little bit more to our Gen X, Gen Ys. And there are a large number of people in our organisation where we need to acknowledge service, and you'll see lots and lots of photos that are sitting up here, and that's important for our baby boomers, in particular acknowledging their corporate knowledge. So we're big on small gestures and big gestures, and we're big on the things that are free and able to do. So I'm going to end this session and I'm going to ask for a little bit of audience participation. So there's 2 people that I'm going to acknowledge in here today, and you're going to help me to do this. I'm going to give you a practice as a big group about what we can do in this space. So from my team, I think George, are you up the back somewhere? George is standing right up in the corner. So George is our volunteer partnerships lead, and I can tell you that George has been doing a great job in terms of leading our volunteer team, particularly through Tropical Cyclone Alfred, and digging really deep. There's so many things that we couldn't do without George's support. And down in this corner, I'm going to ask Susie Musgrove to come down from right here. Come and stand up down here, Susie. There's no participation here. Now, Susie I want to call out because Susie's been looking after me to get ready to come into the conference, right? There's been some really lovely communication with Susie. She's been patient with me while I've been trying to get the presentation done while we had this cyclone thing going on and all those sorts of things. But what we're going to do is we're going to participate and show them both a little bit of love in this space. So we're going to do this in a very traditional way, but a different shape. We're going to do a Mexican wave, right? And what we're going to do is we're all going to stand up, and we're going to make this wave in a minute. We're going to make it go from George up the top down here, and when it gets down to Susie, I want everyone to give it a big clap. It's going to finish like this. And then what we're going to do is we're going to send that wave straight back up and go to George, and it's going to go give him a big clap. So we want to express our appreciation. Last thing you need to do before we have afternoon tea, and we're going to get going. So this is a real test to see how we go as a collective group. Can we get organised? We're going to start up in the top corner. Who's up in the very top corner in the crowd? George. All right, George. See if you can start the Mexican wave. Let's do this together. Let's send it down here. We're coming to you, Susie. Ready? Here it comes. Ready for the big clap? Hey! And now all the way back up the top to George. Hey! Well done. Take a seat. Take a seat. So I'll leave you with one last piece in that. That's a really heartfelt piece for me, Susie. So the other thing that's really important, and I think you can see it through a number of the presentations today, is making sure that you capture the journey, right? All these photographs, if you watch these photographs, you must come away from this saying, my gosh, at Volunteering Gold Coast, they love a good certificate presentation, right? It's one of those things where I would love to see that change, but it's such a strong part of the culture that to pull that back out is going to, it might meet my needs, but it's not actually going to meet the needs of the people who want to go and take that certificate home and show someone else with it. So my final message is be sure to capture the story. Be sure to capture the story when your volunteers are in action, doing the ordinary things that you know are actually quite extraordinary, having a great impact. make sure that you change the narrative using different images and rituals. And I think, I want to encourage you to be brave. If you can get your team together to do whatever your version of the Mexican wave is, create a new history and a new ritual that kind of goes with that. So lots of opportunities to be creative and explore this idea of giving feedback in different ways. What I would love to get from you over the next 2 days is I'd love to hear about your stories about how you're doing it, so that I can take your gems back with me. Thank you.
If you have any questions for any of those speakers that we've just heard from, or any comments for them, pop them in Slido, and then we'll be disseminating the answers after the conference. We're going to take a brief break. Let's say, if you don't need to leave the room, but you want to just jump up and do this, do that. If you need to go to the loo, cool. Let's be back at 5 past. Thank you.